Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our show. To become a successful business owner and entrepreneur, getting the right education is key to becoming the very best in your field. But sometimes there can be things that are working against us in our personal lives, not just circumstantial, but physical and psychological things, such as ADD, ADHD, autism, even head trauma can play a factor. On today's show, we're going to talk to a neurology specialist who has a very unique process with a proven track record in helping many of these conditions. We have the one and only Dr. Douglas Brown's on the show. He'll be talking about our brain and things we can do to better ourselves. We also have my dear friend Ian Norris who will be co-hosting with us. Today we'll be discussing how the brain works, and if you're looking to figure out how to increase your learning or just figure out what a role it plays in your success, stick around. You won't want to miss a minute, I promise you. We'll be right back. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to our show, everybody. I'm joined by my dear friend Ian Norris, co-host. How are you, Ian?
Greetings, fabulous. How are you?
I'm doing fabulous as well. I don't ever say fabulous unless I'm around you, but everything you say just sounds so interesting.
Well, I don't know. You may feel differently in about 3 minutes.
I probably will. How have you been, my friend? Okay?
Great, great.
Everything's busy?
Yeah, well, I always say busy, don't I? After the last time I was with you, I talked about some brainstorming to simplify and do different things, help improve. Well, my wife and I had thought about some of those things, and we finally decided to implement some things ourselves to be not quite so busy. Sure. To try and really clean things up. And actually, we found that in the process of doing these, implementing these new processes that I'm still working on right now, we're finding that the concept of outsourcing parts of what we do, the perception of that outsourcing is completely different to the reality. And we're actually finding that it's helping a lot, and we've got more that we're working on, so we're excited about how that will also add to us not being quite so busy. And what I would like to do, if I may, last time I was with you, I touched on the first 2 points that from an interview with Richard Branson. And I said last time I would follow up with the next 2 points, and so if I may just take a couple of minutes. Essentially, it was an article written about the art of brainstorming. And so I touched on the first 2 points last time, and this time I wanted to talk about number 3, define the problem, not the solution. And so in the process, he said, of allowing everybody to talk and think creatively in a brainstorming session, he said, help everybody to stay on track. Remember what the problem is and look for the solution to that versus allowing, sometimes you get into this discussion that deviates a little bit. And maybe if you are focusing on just what 1 or 2 people are saying, you can completely forget and lose focus on the problem itself. So that's what he said, define the problem and not the solution. And another point, number 4, closely in line with that, was keep the ideas fresh. Don't necessarily see only the same people in those sessions.
Yeah, right.
Explore with others in your company, or maybe if it's a different environment or a different process that you're working on, encourage others to help out. And what that does is, again, going back to the defining the problem, not the solution, it allows you to get fresh ideas in, different things that can maybe ultimately lead to the solution, but it also helps you to avoid getting the same solutions from the same people and forcing the problem to be fixed by the solution versus getting different solutions and allowing them to be tailored to the problem.
And what I found, like in mastermind group, let's say if I'm setting up a mastermind group, I like to bring a broad range of different perspectives. I'll have, sometimes I'll invite new interns in or people that are 18, 19 years old, and I'm surprised a lot of times by the ones that kind of have the great idea or the ones that decide to kind of almost run the meeting. It's not maybe who you're anticipating that is going to kind of stand up and take charge. And I know what you mean about going in there with a certain specific topic in mind, saying, here's what we're going to talk about, and we're primarily going to look to YouTube, because I've been in these groups where everybody individually has a very high value, but when there's no agenda and everybody kind of go in and it's just a spitball session or a brainstorming session, it can get very counterproductive, and it can go on all these twists and turns and tangents. And after an hour and a half, everybody's looking at their watch saying, okay, well, is it lunch yet? Or hey, I got to go, and nothing was really accomplished.
Yeah. So just a couple of pointers to help maybe.
Yeah. But I'm very excited about our guest, Dr. Douglas Brown. And I know that he really is going to talk with us about the brain and how it works, but also some other conditions. I think that myself growing up, I'm sure I had to be ADD, ADHD. I'm sure I still am, quite sure. But you know that I give a talk that's very close to this on how your brain and your mind are kind of two different things. And I always kind of look at your brain as a computer. It's kind of the hardware, the gear, the monitor, the keyboard, the actual stuff. And then your mind is more like the operating system and the software programs. And what we know is one doesn't work well without the other. You know, you have, sometimes your computer can be fine, but if you upload a virus or a worm, something like that, all the heck breaks loose and nothing works right. And at the same time, if your operating system and everything's fine, but the actual gear has a problem, let's say you fry your motherboard on your computer, it doesn't work well. And I know people are like that too. I've met a few over the years that their brain, they actually incurred a brain injury. And so their mind or operating system, so to speak, is fine, but they have a hard time articulating what they're thinking because they actually have sustained this injury. But more than that, I know a lot of people that their brain's fine, but their mind, you have to question, you know, you wonder a little bit. So we're going to get a lot of insight on that. Let's bring him out now, Dr. Douglas J. Brown, everybody. Good to have you. I said, now let me get this straight. J. Douglas Brown, but you go by Doug, right?
Right.
The reason I'm confused is there's an old sales friend of mine. His name's J. Douglas Edwards, and he mentored Tommy Hopkins and a lot of the great entrepreneurs of our generation. And you actually look a little bit like J. Douglas, so. But we'll try not to.
Must have been a good-looking guy.
He was an amazing guy. He's dead now, but no. Welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you, and I have to say this topic really fascinates me because so many times, you know, we all are trying to get the best education that we can, whether it be traditional education or, you know, other types of education, self-education. But a lot of times there's things working against us in our lives, and sometimes it's not just circumstances, but it's actually, you know, the process of learning itself. And I wanted to, I need some answers. That's basically why I had you on, Doc. But before we get into it, talk a little bit about, you know, where you're from, your background, where you're from.
Well, I'm from Alabama, born and raised. Spent several years in Miami. Did my undergraduate work in Birmingham Southern College, which is in Birmingham, Alabama. Got a degree in biology, minored in chemistry, of course, pre-med from medical school. Did my graduate work in medicine and chiropractic in Georgia. And after that, I did postgraduate work with a Carrick Institute for residence training, and then did some more residence training in Baptist Medical Center, all here in Alabama.
Wow. I have to say Birmingham is a great little town. And the medical community of Birmingham is really cutting edge. In fact, I think we have a mutual friend, Dr. Galen McCullough,
Right.
who I think you're going to be doing some things with. And
Right.
Fantastic, fantastic gentleman. Let's talk a little bit about the work that you're doing. Can you give us in simple terms how the brain actually works? I know we could probably spend hours on this conversation, but give us
Right.
kind of a basic rundown.
Right. Usually, I will talk about this subject for at least 45 minutes,
Right.
usually. I brought along a friend
Okay.
that I think you might have mentioned earlier.
I saw that earlier under the desk, and I was like, did we have another guest? And he's Paris since I've...
This is a model of the human brain.
Mm-hmm.
We'll take his skull cap off,
Okay.
and this is the brain.
Yep.
All right, so,
Careful.
yeah. Brain weighs about 3 pounds on average. And it has the consistency of maybe some almost set caulking. Kind of squishy. Yet it's still,
sorry,
yeah, this one doesn't have that.
Okay.
Yet it's still, this little thing here has the ability to contemplate itself and contemplate the universe, this thing. In addition, it has some 300 billion nerve cells. 300 billion. And those nerve cells connect to each other in thousands of different ways. And so when that is estimated, one doctor said that the connections in the human brain add up to more than there are particles in the universe. You can get your head around that.
Hard to.
Which means it's infinite. Infinite learning. We never utilize part of the ability to learn in our lifetime.
And I know a lot of people say that, you know, that maybe we're only using a very small percentage of our brain. Is that true, or there's kind of some controversy about that?
No, it's not true.
Not true. Okay.
No, we use the whole brain, but the idea is how much of the capacity of the brain do we use?
Yeah.
That's what they're talking about. I mean, how much of it do we have left over when we die?
Right.
It's almost all of it. But the brain, looking at the brain, it has sides. It's got a left side and a right side. You know, you've heard people saying, oh, he's left brain or he's right brain. Well, that's actually true to a great extent. The right side and the left side, when we talk about those in emotional terms, we're referring to the frontal lobes, which is these lobes right here in the front of the brain. Now, in the middle of the brain, there's this structure called the corpus callosum. Big term, but it's that thing right there. And that thing is what the brain uses to communicate one side to the other side. It's critical. That communication has to be continuously going back and forth in order for us to function day to day. Now, we discovered by a technique that they call colossotomy, where they would cut the brain in half of a living person. They would literally cut this corpus callosum in half to keep each side from communicating with each other to keep a seizure from spreading from one side of the brain to the other. Well, we discovered by that technique that there really are two people in our heads. Really is. And here's what happened.
My wife might argue 3 or 4.
Yeah, that's right. So here's what happened when that procedure was done. There's 2 well-documented cases. One was the person was sitting there reading a book, and she was complaining. She says, I'm reading my book, and my left hand keeps closing the book. I can't get through a book. And here's why. It turns out that the left frontal lobe, temporal, can read. It can read the written word. It knows its alphabet, knows mathematics and such as that, but the right cannot read.
Interesting.
So, since the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body, that left hand is going to keep closing the book because it is bored.
I don't want to do it.
Exactly. So the way it was fixed, though, I mean, it was a simple fix. It was just read out loud. That's all she had to do. Read out loud, and now the right brain can hear the story and also be entertained by it.
Interesting. I am fascinated by this. Let's take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to ask you a little bit about ADD, ADHD. Obviously, I have a 5-year-old that's kind of concerned now, and quite frankly, I need some answers, Doc. So stick with us. We'll be right back more with Dr. Douglas Brown in a minute. Don't go anywhere. Thank you. Welcome back to the show. We've been discussing how our brain works, and it's interesting how the left side and the right side, sometimes they don't get along real well, or there's differences between them. But I want to talk a little bit about ADD, ADHD. I know that's a huge problem in the U.S., or at least so many people are being diagnosed with those problems. Talk a little bit about why it's such a big thing now. Because I remember when I was in school, they didn't know much about it. They would say, well, he's a bad kid. But now it's a pretty big thing.
Yeah, I think it's become more of a problem today because it's actually being discussed and identified as a problem. Now, what is going on? Well, the way the brain works is by activation, which means one part of the brain gets activated so that it can work, and another part of the brain has to be inhibited. So the right frontal lobe does art. It knows how to do art. It's creative. In order for me to draw a painting or to paint a painting, I have to inhibit my left frontal lobe in order to do that, because my left frontal lobe likes to do mathematics and such as that. Okay? Now, if I'm going to do mathematics and be able to concentrate in school, I've got to be able to inhibit my right frontal lobe. Well, see, also what exists in that right frontal lobe is love, romance, relationships. You know? So when you're a young man and you're sitting there in class and you're trying to concentrate, the teacher's going through this calculus, and you're looking, and there's this girl. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Very
I see
hard.
what you're saying.
So with ADD and ADHD, what we find is that they're having trouble engaging that left frontal lobe. So there's little tricks that I'll give parents. I'll give you one. We talked a little earlier about it. The trick is like this. In order for a person to do mathematics or focus, they've got to activate the left frontal lobe.
Right.
Well, there's more than one way to do that. Since the left cortex...
You can't just do this? Like,
no, you can't just do that.
Kickstart it a little bit?
Since the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body, and all of the information coming from the right side of the body goes to the left side of the brain, we can stimulate this part of the brain by doing physical movement. And what I like to tell the kids to do, and teachers are doing this in classrooms that I've instructed them to,
Sure.
Tell the kid, stand up, stand on your right foot only, balancing, holding your hands out, and close your eyes. It's really hard to do. They're going to fall all over the place. It's hard. But what it's doing is activating the left frontal lobe. And the other thing that they can do during the classroom, if they want them to do something technical, be sure that the light source, like the window, is on the right side, because everything coming from that side stimulates the opposite brain.
Wow.
So there's little tricks like
Simple
that.
things,
Can I ask a
Yeah, it
question?
can help the
Yeah.
kid.
If that's a good technique for establishing the left side of the brain's activity, what if you're okay on that side, but you're weak on perhaps the other side? Can the same thing apply to that?
Yes, yes, and actually I do that because I've had many patients who are just flat emotionally. You know, they're just, autistic kids, for example, they can't read faces. They don't know what you're feeling by looking at you. They just can't get it. So we have to get frontal lobe activation with those children.
I see.
And that's how we treat it. That's just one of a multitude of ways that we get stimulation in that right frontal lobe. Because when we stimulate that frontal lobe, we automatically inhibit the left frontal lobe.
And once we do an exercise like that, and it gets stimulated, does it stay stimulated, or is it like a muscle that you can strengthen?
You have to strengthen
And after a while, then it's pretty easy to stimulate.
After a while, just like the brain has what we call an immediate early gene response, which means that the DNA starts changing just like that, immediately. So the more you start doing the activity and stimulating that part of the brain, the more it will be more easily stimulated later. So you can start accessing it on your own without having to do something physical to do it.
Well, those are great tips, and I know that when I was in school, for instance, I knew I had a problem because at school I started getting bad grades probably around 6th grade, and I remember actually wanting to put forth the effort and organizing. I remember once I organized like 5 or 6 guys to stay at my house, and we're going to pull an all-nighter, we're going to do the work, we're going to ace this test. And everybody flaked out after the first hour. They had pizza and were out. And I was like, come on, we have to take this serious. I'm the only one that stayed up all night studying. And the next day, everybody went and got A's and B's, and I failed the test. And I was like, this. And what happened was I got discouraged in the belief system that you could even do something about it. But what you're saying is there's simple things that we can do to.
That's right.
take
There's simple things. And see, when you were doing that, you were engaging, again, right frontal lobe activity, because you were being emotional about it.
Sure.
Come on, guys, we got to get this done.
Yeah.
That was only stimulating that right. And it's the one side you didn't need to stimulate.
Yeah, and then everybody fell asleep, and I was sitting there in dead silence, like, it just was not working.
It wouldn't.
Well, and what was interesting, too, recently I read an article that said that 75% of great entrepreneurs and CEOs and, drivers out there that are out there at the big levels, 75% are ADD or ADHD, and that struck me as kind of odd. And when I read the article, it talked about being able to follow direction. From a very early age, here's when you need to go to bed. Here's what you're going to do. Even school. Here's when you're allowed to go to the bathroom. Here's when you have to do this or that. And then, of course, right to our jobs. And following direction. I mean, I think that many are willing to go outside of that and accept more risk to not have to fit into that mold. So I thought that was pretty interesting. There might be hope for me yet.
Yeah, you're just fine.
Let's talk briefly, Doc, real quick about autism. Recently, I know that there's a been a lot of controversy in the media recently. One with actress Jenny McCarthy, that she had written a book, or she had a son that was autistic, and she claimed that through proper diet and other things that she'd done, home remedies, that she cured autism. And I know in any medical field, the word cure is kind of a no-no. But if you look at footage, I have to tell you that there's just no signs of those autistic tendencies. Do you think it's possible to cure something like that, or I should say eradicate something like that?
Yeah, it's possible to eradicate the symptoms. I've got patients that have succeeded that way.
Yes.
And just like with her, she no doubt somehow tapped into some of these things that we do as a neurologist to correct these problems. She activated that child's frontal lobe, and she got it to where it was activating on its own, so that he could then start reading people's emotion. He could then start seeing people and saying, oh, wow, I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. I realize that now. You know, it's...
Sure.
It's
well,
possible.
and when the controversy first started, it was really negative about her claims. And then now, as time goes on, people are really getting on board and substantiating a lot of things that you're saying. I know, too, I have to ask about this quickly. There's a particular device that could help people get well faster. Talk briefly about that, and then what's needed to get something, because I have to tell you, I think we have a couple of sales here already, I'm telling you.
Well, like I just said, the brain works by activation.
Right.
When we have to be able to activate whatever area of the brain that we want to use. It has to be able to work, activate. So if the child, let's say, has autism, cannot activate the right frontal lobe, what if I had a device that I could directly stimulate that right frontal lobe without any kind of invasive surgery or anything like that? What if I could do that directly and do a few treatments and have that child back to almost normal? Would that not be almost like a miracle?
Yeah.
It would be. And the device is called transcranial electromagnetic stimulation. And it's about $400,000 worth.
So far, if one of, say, our left frontal lobe or whatever is not stimulated, you can go in there and just basically stimulate it several times to where it's almost turned on now.
Exactly.
And it works.
Exactly. Same thing with people who've had stroke. They can benefit. The area around the brain where the stroke occurred, I can stimulate around that area and build back what they lost.
Wow. And do they have a payment plan for something like this? No, actually, you know, it seems like a lot of money, $400,000, but when you think about it, you know, a lot of people that run successful companies, maybe they've had a stroke or other problems, being able to have them back on board functioning at near 100% capacity, that could equate to ultimately millions of dollars.
It is.
So
it's
what
priceless.
a breakthrough.
And the research I want to do with that device is just going to be it's earth-shaking is what it's going to be. It's going to change everything.
It's something like that. I imagine different cases demand different regimens of treatment. Yes. So would it be a case-by-case basis that would dictate how long that sort of treatment would go on?
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Doc, let's talk real quick about your Center for Brain Disorder and where people can get more information, because I think a lot of people out there, you know, unfortunately with topics like this, I could sit here for hours, and the brain is so complex, and I know there's so many things that we can do to benefit ourselves, but talk a little bit briefly about the Center for Brain Disorder.
Well, that's what I've set up. I've got a program that I use to make corrections in the people with brain disorders. You know, a brain disorder is only a part of the brain that's malfunctioning. That's all it is. So what do? We just correct the area that's malfunctioning so that they can function in society the way they want to. That's all we do. So I go to Birmingham a couple times a month, and I work up there. I got a whole team that I work with up there. And I'd like to build a team here in Foley, Alabama.
Yeah.
I think that would be a great thing, because it's not being done down here.
And are they looking for case studies, people they can kind of experiment on? Because I have no problem with risk, as you know. Well, and if people wanted to get more information about what you're doing, is there a site or something?
Yeah, they can go to my website.
Okay. And that site is, give them your website.
Well, the long version is browncenterforbraindisorders.com. Short version, drbrownCenter.com.
drbrownCenter.com.
Right.
Well, thank you so much. We're out of time. Fascinating stuff, and please come back, would you? We'd love to kind of do a follow-up and see that, maybe even bring on some patients next time. I'd love to follow up with you.
You know, I have a little bit of brain knowledge for you. You know, I'm left-handed, and they say that if the left side of the brain controls the right-hand side of the body, then only left-handed people are in their right mind.
All right, well, there you have it. Well, I want to give a thanks here to Dr. Douglas Brown. Thanks to Ian Norris. That's our show. We're out of time. Don't forget to get involved in your local community and be forgiving of others. Good night, everybody. Hi, I'm Dan Vega, and thank you for watching our channel. I want to take a second to tell you about a resource that's helping thousands of people across the country, Blue University. Blue University is the premier online business school for entrepreneurs and business leaders. If you find yourself in a day-to-day grind where you've lost your joy or you're just tired of struggling, then check out blue.university. That's BLU.university. I can promise that you receive nothing short of a multi-million-dollar education. And if you want a completely different life in 3 to 6 months and a way to create wealth in 5 years or less, then again, check it out. That's BLU.university. Find out why blue is the new color of success. Also, make sure to subscribe to this channel or to give us a good rating, but that's only if you see value. And when you do receive value, make sure to share it with someone else. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.